The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this 17th of July. July is just ticking away. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week, and you will continue to have a good week. All right, I guess there's a lot happening, and Republican National Convention is going on. We'll talk a little bit about that later on when we talk about, probably talk about Nikki Haley, talk about a few things about Trump and Vance. A little bit more about J.D. Vance, which I think is important that we get a full picture on him. And yeah, so obviously in politics, a lot going on while during this week. And then once this week is over, the campaign really kicks off, and we'll have a lot to talk about there. And of course, then we have the Democratic National Convention, and we have still the open question of whether Biden will be the ultimate nominee. We will see. I want to start today with talking about failure and incompetence, and I think we should start with the assassination attempt on President Trump. And the more I read about this, the more the information comes out. There are only two conclusions one can come to: is either the Secret Service is incredibly incompetent, or there's some grand conspiracy here. Although to try to understand that conspiracy and try to make any sense of it, I'm not sure you can, but. I think, without a doubt, the answer to that question is just sheer incompetence. We've talked about this a little bit, but I want to reinforce this, that people are incompetent. People do fail, particularly people in government. People in government are not very good at what they do. And we have this vision that, okay, but it's a Secret Service. A Secret Service is just another government agency that happens to deal with force, so at least it's dealing with, something that the government is supposed to deal with. It's not doing something the government is not supposed to do. But there's no reason to believe that they're that much competent than other government agencies. And this, I include in this kind of view is the military. I think we have a romanticized bizarre view of the military and anything to do with the military. But the reality is that the incompetence goes through and through. The corruption, the lack of focus, the lack of thinking, the lack of strategy. I mean, look, it comes down from the top, and we haven't had a president with good strategy, and I don't know how long, good thinking, and I don't know how long, very, very long time. And so this affects every branch of the government. Particularly every branch, not so much every branch of the government, every section of the executive branch. So, you've got Secret Service saying, well, we weren't on that roof because it was slanted. They only go on flat roofs, it turns out. I mean, really? But the sniper could be on it. It wasn't that slanted. Why didn't they shoot when they saw him? We still don't have exact answer to that one. How could they not have somebody watching access points to this roof, even if they didn't position somebody there? And you can go on and on and on. And my conclusion is they just blew it. They just blew it. In a realm where blowing it means human lives. And again, I want to emphasize, this is not unique to the Secret Service. The FBI has often shown its incompetency in its politicization. We saw that during the Trump years and after the Trump years. We've seen that with the military spending 20 years in Afghanistan and having literally all they've had to show for it are the bodies of what? 1,000, 2,000 young American men. That's what they have to show for it. We saw it in incompetence in Iraq. We saw it in every aspect of the war in Iraq. The disaster was Fallujah. Over and over and over again. You guys probably don't even remember Fallujah. So and you see this incompetence leads everybody to believe, not everybody, but leads a lot of people to believe that's impossible. I mean, hey, these are tough guys. These are, a lot of Secret Service, probably former Marines. These are smart people. They work for the president. They're in the White House. These are really amazing people. They don't fail. So if they failed, it must be a conspiracy, because you have to have an explanation. People need explanations for things. And since there is no explanation other than, incompetence, and these people can't be incompetent. These are the Superman of America. Then all you've left is, the only explanation left is, it has to be some conspiracy. It's much easier to think that the evil is super smart than it is to think that people you think are good are just incompetent. But yeah, there is no conspiracy here. Even if it is a conspiracy, it's a pretty lame conspiracy. But there is no conspiracy here. This is just plain people not doing their job. People slacking off because that's easier. People slacking off because doing your job requires effort, requires focus. And, when's the last time anybody shot at a president or a presidential candidate? A long time. So what the hell? I mean, Biden didn't even approve Secret Service protection for RFK, and RFK comes from a family where people tend to get shot. You'd think they'd have some security there? I am still convinced that the shooter is just a nihilistic young man who, if Trump wasn't coming around town, he would have found a school to shoot up or something else. So there's nothing more than that, I think, going on here, and everything else is being blown out of proportion. But here's the thing about incompetence. People die because of incompetence. And in this case, somebody did die because of incompetence. One of the crowd in the Trump rally, 2 people got seriously injured because of this incompetence. But the incompetence, of course, is not unique to the Secret Service. It is broad-based. All I want to say, and we'll get to another example of this in a minute, all I want to say here is beware of the conspiracy theories. Beware of simplistic explanations for phenomena. Beware of people trying to, create explanations for things that don't really need explanations, because they are what they are. As sometimes uncomfortable and as hard to believe as it is. So let me go to another, even much more bloody, much more devastating, much more horrific example of incompetence. And that is the Israeli military's response to October 7th. The military is going through a process right now of reviewing its actions on October 7th, and ultimately in the lead up to October 7th, intelligence reviews, everything. And ultimately, I think in the long run, they'll also do a review of what happened in Gaza post October 7th. But right now, the first reports are coming out over October 7th, and they're starting with the most concrete, the most localized, because that's the one that's easiest to do. And even there, it has created massive amount of controversy. But they've started out in Israel with a report, a lengthy report, and a very, very detailed report of what happened in Kibbutz Be'eri, a small community with 1,000 residents close to the Gazan border. They start out with a review of what happened to this community. In terms of literally kind of minute by minute, minute by minute maybe is an exaggeration, but step by step, from the moment they knew that, from the moment the Hamas crossed over the border, to the moment the people inside the kibbutz realized what was going on, to the house-to-house fighting that pursued, to the engagement of the Israeli military in that, and to the point where when was the prime minister notified, when was the chief of staff of the military notified that this was going on, when did the troops show up, when did they leave, everything. And let me just say, there's already massive disagreements just about the facts. The reporters come out, and a number of people associated with the Israeli special forces, at least 2 special forces units, have basically come out and said the report is completely biased and tilted and misrepresenting the facts of what actually happened, in order to demonize the military and to make the residents of this kibbutz seem more heroic than they really were. I don't know what the reality is. I don't. But there's no question that one thing comes. Let me just give you some stats on what happened. So 1,000 people live in this kibbutz. Of the 1,000 people, 101 civilians died, were killed, murdered. 31 security personnel responsible for trying to protect the kibbutz and personnel who came afterwards to try to fight with Hamas, with the civilians there. 31 of them were killed. An additional 30 residents were kidnapped, were taken over to Gaza. So 10% of the population of this village, of this kibbutz, were killed during this episode, during this day, really, during this day. It was horrific. Some of the worst scenes of torture, of killing children, of brutalizing people. Some of the worst scenes of that happened on this kibbutz. Anyway, the report basically shows that the Israeli military is completely unprepared. That it took hours for any troops to get there as the Hamas are going from house to house, killing the residents. The report shows that by the time the people in the kibbutz who were the security people, there were 2 people who had keys to the place where they had the automatic weapons, the semi-automatic weapons, right? The AR-15s and so on. 2 people made an attempt to get to that hut, each individually. Both were killed by Hamas before they made it there. So whatever defense was happening in the kibbutz, individuals were doing it with handguns that they might have had at home. So there was almost no ability to actually defend themselves because there was no weapons. It took hours for the first members of Israeli special forces to arrive and to start getting an assessment of the place. Several times there were miscommunications between different units. There was friendly fire accidents. It was just a cluster F. It was just complete chaos, complete lack of information, lack of proper dealing with hostage situations. A lot of Hamas took some family members hostages in their homes, and the soldiers were outside, and then the question was what to do. And in one case, a tank was used basically to blow up the whole place, and or to shoot at the place that killed some of the hostages. Ultimately, when they entered trying to free the hostages, in the exchange of fire, all the hostages died. Israeli special forces are really, really good at hostages retrieval, and yet they completely failed on that day. And you see the report is just filled with the Central Command failed. They sent troops to the wrong places. They sent the wrong type of troops with the wrong equipment. They didn't know what was going on, even though Israel has some of the most sophisticated electronic warfare and some of the most sophisticated surveillance equipment and some of the sophisticated everything. They didn't integrate that information, and what I believe still is the best army in the world, the best military force in the world, failed, showed complete and utter incompetence. And as a consequence, I'm not surprised that there's certain conspiracy theories out there saying, oh, Netanyahu knew this was on purpose. There's no way that the army could have been this stupid. This could have been this bad. This was whatever. And the tragedy here, the hundreds, well, 1,200 people died ultimately all over that area, the south of Israel. Soldiers, civilians, many were raped, many were tortured, burnt alive, all kinds of just some of the most horrific stories you can imagine. And, you know, you'd expect some casualties, but a lot of this, even with the intelligence failure, even with the failure maybe in the first hour, a lot of this resulted from, well, I don't know what's going on here. What happened? Okay, my computer's going a little nuts. All right, how do I close this? Yeah, all right, I definitely need a new computer. I know what I need to buy, and we will do that soon. I think I'm challenging the ability of this setup that I have to handle everything that I'm doing right here. The computer's computing, but just not in the way that I want it to. And now one of the apps is frozen. Give me a second here so I can see if I can deal with this. Come on. It's computing things I don't want it to compute. That's the problem. There, I'm not responding. Force quit. Force quit. All right, it's gone. This is another story on an unbelievable scale of incompetence. And it doesn't surprise me there's incompetence. I mean, there's always been incompetence. You know, being truly successful and really, really good at something is hard work, and it takes effort, and it takes it takes some people to really be, you know, engaged and focused and care and have ability. And God, I mean, when I was in the Israeli military, there was mistakes and incompetence that happened even back then. And I have to believe things are worse today, not better, because the educational system is worse today than it was back then, because the culture is worse today than it was back then, in the world generally. It doesn't surprise me that Secret Service can't think. Who can? How many people can? I mean, outside of business, and particularly entrepreneurial business, how many people are thinking out there? It's not surprising that incompetence is on the rise, given our educational system, given the quality of our culture. And it's not surprising that in the face of this incompetence, people gravitate towards the craziest, most bizarre, most absurd conspiracy theories to try to find some kind of explanation for what they're seeing, given that they can't actually comprehend the actual failures. I have no doubt, by the way, that when Israel looks back at the Gaza war, what is it now, 9 months, right? They will look back at the Gaza war and they will analyze it, and if they do a good job, Israel's made a lot of mistakes, I mean, I don't know the numbers of troops that were killed in friendly fire, or killed because of mistakes of command, or killed because of their own mistakes, but I'm sure the number is probably almost as big as the number killed by the actual enemy. You remember, I mean, the most obvious of that was where the Israeli soldiers actually killed hostages, mistook them for Hamas and killed them. So incompetence, accidents happen. And we live in a world where that will happen more often, not less often. We live in a world where finding real ability, consistent over the long run, is becoming harder and harder. It's one of the reasons one marvels when one sees real competence and real success and real ability manifest out there in the world. So, I'm going to be tracking these reports as they come out about October 7th. I'm interested. I've been reading some of the reports, again, that just came out on what happened in Kibbutz Be'eri. I'm also interested in kind of the inter-military disagreements and fights and arguments, and people are really, really upset at one another, and the politics in the Israeli military is as bad as the politics anywhere else, and who gets credit and who gets blame is all going to be super fascinating to see. It's also interesting that many of the commanders in the Israeli military who clearly, I'm not allowed to say we're responsible for, right? Because nobody's responsible for what happens October 7th except Hamas, right? You can't say Netanyahu is responsible. God, people flipped out when I said he might be responsible for it. Many of the military commanders who were responsible for the failure of intelligence, failure of being prepared, failure of having troops deployed in the right places in order to deal with this, almost all of these people have not yet resigned. There are very, very few people within Israel who've taken any responsibility for what happened, any responsibility for the failure. And this is a sign of how weak Israeli leadership is right now. And this comes from the top. The fact that Netanyahu and his government have not been willing to take any responsibility for what happened, any statement about their own culpability in the sense of the mistakes that they made leading up to this, mistakes that they made, maybe not taking certain intelligence seriously, mistakes that they made in where they deployed troops. The fact that at the very top they're not taking responsibility filters down, and generals and others within the intelligence community and elsewhere don't feel the need to take responsibility either. And you've got different intelligence units now fighting. The analysis unit and the signal intelligence unit, who did what, who guided what, who is responsible for what. Everybody is at each other's throats in the Israeli military right now, trying to blame the other for what happened, while a war is going on right now. It's an ugly picture. It's an ugly picture. And not one that you're going to hear much about, certainly not in the U.S., and not one that people accept, because, again, we have a vision of the military as this competent, but they're not particularly. And the American military is the same. Politics, blame shifting. Who lost their job because of Afghanistan? Who lost their job because of withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was such a disaster? What was it? 13 Marines died during that withdrawal. Who lost their job because of, ISIS rising out of the ashes of the American effort? And I would say America funded ISIS in its early days, unbeknownst to the Americans. Who lost their jobs because of the intelligence failure before 9/11? Who lost their jobs because Al-Qaeda wasn't taken out and Bin Laden wasn't taken out before 9/11, because terrorist attacks against America already before that? Who lost their jobs because of any of that? No, we live in a world at the political level where nobody takes responsibility. Think about how quickly CEOs of companies are kicked out. Think about how quickly, how many CEOs of Boeing have been replaced recently. Think about how many CEOs of companies who have a bad year or a bad quarter or a bad couple of years are out, and how quick they are out. And think about how rarely it is, how absolutely rarely it is, that a senior person in the military or a senior person in government ever gets fired, ever leaves his job because they screwed something up. It's going to be interesting to see if the head of the Secret Service resigns. She's just been subpoenaed to come and answer questions before a House committee. So Republicans have subpoenaed her. So that'll be interesting to hear what she has to say, right? What she has to say. But there's no mechanism for like profit, like shareholder meetings, like things like that, or boards of directors to actually. I mean, it should be, right? I mean, the president should be firing generals. Generals should be firing junior generals. But it's all political. It's not about competence. Not about competence. Yeah, Rob says, think about coaches of sports teams, how quickly they lose their jobs when they have a losing season. And if you don't think Afghanistan, Iraq, and October 7th are losing seasons, I don't know what is. Another interesting aspect of this is the Israeli parliament just voted today or yesterday, on a bill to establish a committee to investigate the failures of October 7th. So to do it at a governmental level, to do it at the national level, not just the army investigating itself, but some kind of entity, to create some kind of entity that investigates everything, including the government's responsibilities, the government's actions, and the responsibilities of the military and the whole shebang. And basically Netanyahu and his coalition voted this down. Netanyahu does not want October 7th investigated. He knows he will not come out of that investigation looking good. So he just doesn't want it. This is the guy so many people love. This is the guy so many people love. He's coming to the United States to give an address before Congress. I am convinced that it's going to be a fire-breathing, principled, amazing speech that every one of us will say, oh, if only American presidents were this courageous and principled. And then he'll go back to Israel and violate every single one of his promises that he makes in the speech, which is his modus operandi, is how he has acted throughout his career. Great speeches in the U.S., never living up to them. All right. No, that is frozen. All right. I don't know. Let's see. He's a great speaker. Great speaker. All right. So that's incompetence. It's there. It's part of our lives, and it's at the highest levels, and it's in agencies and places you wouldn't expect. And don't fall for simplistic, silly, superficial, conspiratorial explanations. There's a principle in logic, I forget what it's called. Usually the simplest explanation is the true one. And in this case, incompetency is the simpler explanation. All right, let's talk about a few things about, politics. Let's talk a little bit about politics. It is the Republican National Convention. J.D. Vance was announced as a VP 2 days ago, and people are, digging deeper into who J.D. Vance is, and then people want to understand as it becomes more and more evident. Occam's razor, thank you. Occam's razor basically says, simplest explanation is usually the true one. So people are looking to Vance, but they're also looking into what does a second Trump administration going to look like? It's probably not going to look like the first Trump administration, but in what ways is it going to be different? What makes it different? So let's look at a little bit of that. So people are asking Trump and trying to figure this out. And then how's Trump going to deal with the conflict zones out there? That's another big one that the whole world is kind of holding their breath to try to figure out and try to analyze. So here's just something I want to read you from Vance that he said, I think 2 years ago, that gives you a little flavor of how out there Vance is and how much of a new right figure he is. So this is what he said. I think Trump is going to run again in 2024. I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, is fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and replace them with our people. So here's the difference between me and Vance, right? I would say fire every one of those mid-level bureaucrats and keep them fired. Who needs them? But he says, replace them with our people. That is, Vance is not against administrative state. He's against administrative state run by the left. He's okay with the administrative state run by the right. This is, by the way, the more interesting part of Project 2025 is not so much their policy statements, which are irrelevant because policy will be determined by Trump, not by the people at Project 2025. But what's interesting about Project 2025 is the amount of vetting they are doing for personnel. They have 3,000 people ready to fill jobs in government, to replace them with our people. So this is not about more freedom, limited government, shrinking government, fire them so we have smaller government. No. This is about control. And the control not being by the bad guys, that is, by the left, but control needs to be on the right, from people on the right. And if that kind of control, they're fine with. They have no problem with. Our people, replace them with our people. Anyway, he goes on. That was the milder thing he said. He goes on and says, quote, and when the court stops you, stand before the country and say, and here he's quoting Andrew Jackson, the Chief Justice has made his ruling. Now let him enforce it. The Chief Justice has made his ruling. Now let him enforce it. So what J.D. Vance's advice to Donald Trump is, do whatever the hell you want to do. And if the courts rule against you, ignore them. Just ignore them. What are they going to do? Is the army going to come in and force you to go by the courts? In other words, make me. In other words, to hell with the American system of government. To hell with checks and balances. To hell with the role of the judiciary. Really, what J.D. Vance is saying here, unequivocally, is to hell with the Constitution. To hell with the Constitution. Constitution doesn't matter. The court's interpretation of that Constitution does not matter. The court's interpretation of law does not matter. What matters is you, Donald Trump's ideas. That's it. Now, if this isn't authoritarianism on a scale we have not seen in this country, we just have not seen in this country. And this is J.D. Vance, who was just nominated vice president. So if you thought, okay, Trump can be crazy, Trump has these authoritarian tendencies, Trump does these crazy things, but we have a good system. We have a system of checks and balances, and we can survive his authoritarian tendencies. And he survives. He surrounds himself with people who are generally decent, who respect the Constitution. They won't let him do the crazy stuff. And then you hear that the vice president is going to encourage him to ignore the Supreme Court. Literally, ignore the Supreme Court. That is something. That is something. That should make you really afraid of a Trump victory. And then he continues. He says, we're in a late Republican period. Now, late Republican period is new right code for, end of the Roman Republic. Waiting for Caesar. Waiting for Julius Caesar to cross the Rubicon and basically establish himself as a dictator. We're in a late Republican period. The Republic is in decline. Only a dictator can save us. Only a Caesar can save us. And he continues, if we're going to push back against it, we're going to have to get pretty wild and pretty far out there and going directions that a lot of conservatives right now are uncomfortable with. So if you thought a first Trump administration was a little out there and a little wild, I think that's nothing. I think that's nothing. I think we're entering into really, truly for the United States of America, uncharted waters in terms of how crazy, nutty, authoritarian, ignoring the rule of law, this administration could very well be. Could very well be. Now, as I said, people are trying to get an understanding of what Trump is thinking about his second administration. He's being interviewed by a lot of people, giving a lot of interviews to try to figure out what his positions are going to be. So, for example, here's one where he and J.D. Vance will probably butt heads. I'm on Trump's side on this one. Trump wants to bring the corporate tax rate down to as low as 15%. 15%. Now that would be amazing. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, agrees with Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley just gave a speech at the National Conservatives where he advocated for raising the corporate taxes. He literally said the worst thing Trump did, the worst thing that the Trump administration did was lower the corporate tax. And Vance agrees with that. Vance has commented that lowering the corporate tax is bad. So it'll be interesting to see how Trump can get a majority. He'll have to arm twist he'll have to arm twist some Republicans in order to get the corporate tax lower. But J.D. Vance does not support lowering the corporate tax, so that'll be interesting. Trump does not want to ban TikTok anymore. It's not for banning TikTok, another good thing. I mean, in this interview, Trump says a bunch of good things, right? More moderate things that, we'll see. For example, Trump said he'd consider Jamie Dimon, the chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase, to serve as Secretary of the Treasury. Can you believe that? I don't know if Jamie Dimon will accept, but Jamie Dimon being Treasury Secretary for Trump is pretty wild, right? I find it hard to believe Jamie Dimon is pro-tariffs. I find it hard to believe that Jamie Dimon is pro a lot of the industrial planning, central planning, government intervention that Trump advocates for. I think on economics, Jamie Dimon is probably one of the best choices you could have for Secretary of the Treasury. I'd probably vote for him for president. certainly over Trump. But I just don't see Diamond and Trump, getting along in a second administration. Maybe in the first, but not in a second. I think Diamond is way too, he's not a free marketer, but he's way out too far on the side of a free marketer than Trump. Trump, during this interview, was kind of talking a lot about William McKinley, who raised enough revenues during the late 20th century through tariffs to avoid imposing an income tax. Now that's, I've talked about this in the past, that's just sheer unadulterated economic ignorance on the part of Trump. But of course, Trump is one of the economically dumbest people I've ever heard speak publicly. So it doesn't surprise me. But, I don't think Jamie Dimon buys into any of that. So that'll be interesting. Trump is also uninterested in the U.S. protecting Taiwan. He actually talked about Taiwan as stealing America's chip industry. So he thinks Taiwan owes us, the nation of Taiwan owes the nation of the United States. He said he has no interest in protecting Taiwan, that he's not going to. Indeed, TSMC's stocks, after this interview was published, dropped 2.4% on the news that a Trump administration would not be interested in protecting Taiwan, and indeed views TSMC as having stolen the technology from the United States, stole our chip business, and therefore, quote, this is Trump, should pay the U.S. for defense. So if we're going to defend Taiwan in any way, Taiwan should pay for it. Trump continued, Taiwan doesn't give us anything. I mean, Trump's understanding of trade is more primitive than a 6-year-old's, basically. Yeah. Anyway, so Taiwan is fearful. Of course, Trump also said that he has no interest in Ukraine, and he also said in the interview, by the way, and here I think he's just lying, that he would never pardon himself. That if he was convicted of a crime in one of the federal cases, that he would just serve his time after his presidency, but he's never gonna pardon himself. I think that's a bull-faced lie. Anyway, I don't think we have anything really positive, much positive, maybe there's some positive, to look forward to in a Trump administration. That's my bottom line. And I don't think anybody knows what a Trump administration is going to look like. Again, I think a lot of really, really negatives from the idea of J.D. Vance being vice president. I think that's scary. But vice presidents don't really matter that much. So it's more, what is Trump going to do while in office? And the reality is, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think I know. I know I don't know. I don't think Trump knows. I think he's going to play by ear. I think a lot will depend on who he lands up hiring. For example, if he hires Jamie Dimon as his Treasury Secretary, things will be a lot better than if he brings some MAGA guy into Treasury. So hard to tell at this point what a Trump administration. Sometimes he says really good things, like let's lower the corporate tax to 15%, but then you listen to J.D. Vance, who wants to increase the corporate tax. So very difficult to assess where they go. The one things we know that Trump and Vance both support unequivocally, fully, consistently is that they're pro-tariffs and anti-immigration. Pro-tariffs and anti-immigration. Yeah, somebody says that Rome came down because they gave everybody citizenship. No, Rome came down because of Christianity, because Christianity weakened its moral core, and that's what destroyed Rome. But that was after the Republic, right? I guess you're talking about the Republic itself. Republic itself came down because it was corrupt and it was open to a dictator, ideologically open to a dictator. There was no real ideology of Ayn Rand says, Mark, by the time Caracalla was in charge, democracy was not in living memory. Yeah. All right, I'm not going to argue with you guys about Roman history, but I will say that Christianity had a big role in the end of in the fall of the Roman Empire. I'm on the side of Gibbons on that one, for what it's worth. Rise and fall of the Roman Empire. All right, let's see. The consolidation of the Republican Party continues under the banner of MAGA, under the banner of Trump and Vance, under the banner of a populist new right. Nikki Haley spoke yesterday. Pathetic. Pathetic, sad, I don't know what to say. She spoke about unity and about the fact that, yes, I don't agree with everything about Donald Trump, but hey, Biden's worse and we got to vote for him and we should all come together and we should appreciate Trump and da-da-da-da-da-da. Then DeSantis came up and the same thing. He just groveled before the masses in the name of unity with Trump, in the name of fidelity to this new concept of unity. And I mean, imagine. I mean, put yourself outside of politics. Is there any realm in your life where somebody calls you the kind of names Trump called DeSantis and Haley, and fought you and dismissed you in the kind of ways that she did, that he did to her? And that is there any time where that is, where in your life, where that happens, and you just go, yeah, okay, I'll support you anyway. And imagine if your boss does that to you. I mean, how long would you stay with the company? Imagine if a board member did that to you. How much would you stay on the board? I mean, just think of circumstances in your life where people treat you really, 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 really shitty, really badly, really horribly. And then you just accept it. And you go shake hands and everything's okay. I don't believe in forgiveness and this kind of making up unless the other party apologizes, unless the other party makes recompense. But in politics, somehow, all is forgiven. Think about what Trump said about Marco Rubio in 2016, and now Marco Rubio is his lackey. Think about what Trump said about Ted Cruz, and now Ted Cruz is his lackey. And you know what this does? This reinforces, I think should reinforce all of our beliefs, that modern American politics is all about one thing and one thing only, and that is power. These people have no character. They have no moral backbone. They have no self-esteem. They have no personality. They have no values. They will do whatever it takes for power, to achieve power. Now, there are exceptions. Somebody points out that McCain never forgave Trump. Yes. Now, didn't like McCain, didn't agree with his agenda, thought he was weak and compromising and couldn't even bring myself to vote for him in 2008. But he had a backbone. He had some character. He was a decent human being. Indeed, think about what Trump said of him later on about said of the fact that McCain was a prisoner of war and how he behaved himself with great courage as a prisoner of war. Think about the kind of human being Trump must be to make fun and to ridicule a prisoner of war's experiences, which is what Trump did to McCain. Romney had a backbone. What's her name? Lynn Cheney had a backbone. I don't agree with Romney. I don't agree with Lynn Cheney on a lot of things. Paul Ryan has had a backbone. Interesting. Did Paul Ryan suddenly come to the convention because Trump was shot at? Did he change his mind? Is Paul Ryan now going to vote for Trump? Paul Ryan had a backbone. He left Congress. He said, I can't handle this. I can deal with this guy. And he left Congress. Because he would not lower himself, demean himself to the point of having to deal with a person who has a horrific, disgusting character. Now, Paul Ryan was a coward in other ways. He did not run a good campaign in 2012 with Romney. He did not. He always voted against this principle. As Part D of Medicare comes to mind in 2003. He often turned around and did whatever. Yeah, so I'm not endorsing Paul Ryan. I'm just saying with regard to Trump, he had a backbone. And only with regard to Trump. And I think he was a good politician. That is, he proposed some really good things. Let me just do something here. All right. I'm not sure if that worked. Yeah, my computer's giving me problems again. All right. I'm trying to... block somebody, but it's not letting me. Anyway, shame on Haley. I like Nikki Haley, but shame on her. Originally, she wasn't invited to convention, which was good. She wasn't there. She didn't grovel. And then after the assassination attempt and, Trump's fake, pathetic, fake and pathetic, attempts at unity, she bought into it and came on board. Come on, computer. Frustrating. All right. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I'll block the wrong person, and then it's impossible to get you back on once I block you. All right, so that's Haley. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Yeah, quickly, Biden. Since assassination, the attempts to remove Biden from the Democratic ticket have kind of gone underground. We're not hearing as much. There's less talk about it. But there's also much more realization that that Trump is probably going to win this, and that Biden cannot win, and that they need to do something. And as a consequence of that, there is a lot of talk behind closed doors about how to remove Trump, how to remove Biden, and the effort is really right now to lobby the people who surround him, because he only takes advice from very few people. It sounds like the only people with any power within the Biden White House right now in terms of having his ear are Hunter. There's a guy with lots of character, and Jill. And that's and maybe a handful of other people. So let's see. Biden's lashing out against Democrats that are attacking him. But I think Adam, another congressman today, Adam something, came out and called for Biden to step aside. It's still going on. It hasn't gone away, it's still there's still, I think, some uncertainty. I never thought the probability was high that Biden would actually be replaced, but I think it's Adam Schiff. Thank you, Adam. Was it Adam Schiff? Adam Schiff called for him to resign today. So it's going to be interesting to see if in what way Democrats can get their act together and actually do what is necessary to get rid of him and to kick him off. Okay, let me just see. Yeah, that's not working. All right. A quick story out of the world of Elon Musk. Elon Musk has announced that both X and SpaceX, in other words, Twitter and SpaceX. Sorry, I was distracted. I got a upsetting text message. I'm sorry. X and SpaceX are both are going to move their headquarters out of California. And they're both going to move to Texas. Twitter, X is still in basically downtown, close to downtown San Francisco. And SpaceX is just south, headquarters are just south of Los Angeles. And X and Elon Musk has basically had it. He said the final straw, according to Musk, his final straw is a new California law that bans school districts from passing policies that require schools to notify parents if their child asks to change their gender identification. So if a student in class wants to change their gender identification, the state is saying you cannot tell the parents, or you cannot have requirements in your school district that require the teacher to tell the parents. Musk wrote, it did make it clear, I did make it clear to Governor Newsom about a year ago that laws of this nature would force families and companies to leave California to protect their children. I think that's absolutely right. He says that Newsom has bent the knee to the far left. Well, no, sorry, that wasn't the case. Newsom replied to Musk by saying you bent the knee when Elon Musk endorsed Donald Trump. But yeah, California, in many respects, particularly for families, is becoming for a lot of people just unlivable. And you know, this is huge. Twitter is a big time employer of people in San Francisco. It has a large headquarters there. They're going to leave and they're going to go to Texas. SpaceX is at a center of a large cluster of companies based just south of LAX, just south of the LA airport, that basically are hardware companies in the space, aerospace, and defense industries. These are startups. These are high-tech companies. Some of these are some of the most exciting companies in the country, and they really have all been built around SpaceX. SpaceX is the first company to establish themselves there, and then all these amazing engineering companies, the kind of manufacturing companies you want in the United States, super high-tech, super sophisticated, and California's basically pushing these people out. So even a conservative school district in Orange County, California, that wants to have a policy to say that parents must be notified cannot do that. So in other words, the state is dictating to school boards what happens at the school level. You know, this is, by the way, more reason why government should get out of education, so that these decisions can be made by private schools. Parents know what the standards of the school are. Parents can decide if they want to send their kids to that school based on the policies of the school. Parents get to choose what school they send their kids to. Schools have different policies because they're run by different entities. In this sense, charter schools are not good enough, because even charter schools have to abide by policies like this. You want true competition in private education, private schools. And until we get that, there won't be a revolution in this country. Until you get that, there is no space, there is no way in which we can really change the world. Now, we can start changing it enough so that happens. But this is why the most important issue at the state level, is education saving accounts. Education saving accounts, not even vouchers, education saving accounts. All right. So that is Elon Musk, two of his major companies leaving California. All right, final story is another super depressing one. I don't know, what's day's tomorrow? We need a positive show. This is depressing. Friday, I might do the whole show a positive show. I might do the whole show a show about I might do the whole show Yaron rules or something like that. Something positive, something to be uplifting, because God, the news is super depressing. Super depressing. Problem is, and this is the problem, a lot fewer people watch the positive shows. And I get a lot fewer contributions for the positive shows. Anyway, Friday, I need to think of a topic for Friday for a positive show, right? All right, finally, on the deja vu all over again, going back to the 70s as a theme, the UK Labour government is basically proposing two separate bills that would basically have the effect of nationalizing the rail system in England. The railways were privatized. I put privatized in quotes, partially, somewhat privatized in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher, based on a proposal delivered to them by my friends at the Adam Smith Institute. And, you know, the rail system in England has its challenges. And I would argue that many of those challenges have to do with the way in which the railroad was privatized and the fact that they didn't go all out. They didn't go as far as they should have. By the way, I think it's true, but the railroad in Italy is private, and it's amazing. I took the rail in Italy, and it was on time and fast and comfortable and amazing, and it's all private. But in England, the privatization has been, I mean, you could argue it's been positive, but the government still dabbled in price controls, and the government still dabbled in if railroads got into financial trouble, like there are 4 railroads in England that are owned by the state already under conservative government. So they didn't go all in. And as a consequence, the railroads didn't do that well. And as a consequence, service is not that great, although I think it's better than what it's going to be. So the solution is that the United Kingdom is going to create a Great British Railways, GBR, which will be a government-run body, which will roll into it, I think, the 14 different railroads that are private today. You see, even the private railroads, they have contracts to run the railroads. They don't literally own the railroads. They don't own the tracks, for example. They are operating it for the government. They have a contract for a particular number of years to run it. And when the contract expires, the government can give it to somebody else, which basically means they're leasing it from the government. The railroads are owned by the government. The government is the one trying to build high-speed rail. The government is everywhere. So when you have a mixed economy, when you have this mixture, privatized, state-controlled, heavily regulated, heavily controlled, prices set by the government, all kinds of other things set by the government, fake private, then it's not going to work. It's a miracle if it works. And it's not. It's just not. I don't believe in miracles. What happens is it fails in one way or another. And then the solution is to nationalize it. Now, the conservative government, which realized this, was dabbling in nationalizing them. Dabbling in it. Now, if the conservatives are going to dabble in nationalization, they only did 4 railroads that are particularly struggling, and they only had price controls over these railroads, and so on and so forth. If the conservatives, the right, so-called right, dabbled in it, well, what do you expect from the left? The left is going to go all in on what the conservatives just kind of played around with. Now, this bill will also gives the authority to the government to nationalize the bus lines. Many of the buses in the UK are run by localities, local governments. And this would make it possible for the UK government, the central government, to basically nationalize all those local services. Anyway, this is just the first, second week, third week of the Labour government, so it's only going to get better from here. They're only going to, we went from a mildly semi-socialist government that was the Conservatives to a all-out, unequivocal, we're all in on, socialism. It doesn't get much more socialist when you start nationalizing industries, right? The other thing that the Labour government wants to do is have a national government-run energy company, utility, which will, own all the unreliable energy, all the wind farms and the solar panels that are so effective in the UK. All right, that is where we are. That is where we are in terms of the news. Just a couple of other things. Chinese government right now is in one of the Communist Party there is in one of these sessions where they go sequester themselves and they think about big thoughts and they consider big things. And and they're facing. So they've gone. It's a retreat that they do every 3 years. I think this one. They have a lot of these different ones with different groups, But this one is really focused on the economy. And China, of course, is in a real economic slump right now. It is massively struggling. It has had a real estate collapse, a massive real estate bubble collapse, or I don't know if it was a bubble, just collapse. It is, investing heavily in manufacturing, but it's not clear it has enough markets to sell into, and it's not clear if that manufacturing is profitable. They're exporting like crazy, but they're also facing tariffs and import controls all over the world, trying to reduce the world's, particularly in the West, dependency on Russian goods. But the problem is that if all these factories are exporting cheap goods, but they can't be profitable, what then? What then? At the same time, as we've said, economic growth is slowing significantly. Consumers have stopped spending because they don't know what the future will bring, so they're worried about the future. So they're starting to save, which is long-term good for the Chinese economy, but the government is worried, and in the short run is what they care about. In the short run, it's a real challenge. Technological innovation is nowhere near as fast as it was 10 years ago, when in many areas China was leading innovation because it was freer. China's also aging dramatically. It's got a shrinking population. That shrinkage is going to increase. One-child policy has been an unmitigated disaster for the Chinese. So you've got slowing economic growth and real slowing economic growth, real economic challenges, and a leadership that wants to see more economic growth because they know their power, their ability to hold on to power depends on it, but who are not willing to liberate the economy in order to generate the growth. It's a political system in which authoritarian rules, the authoritarianism of the Communist Party rules, and as a consequence, there's little innovation, little progress, a little profitable economic activity that actually makes sense long term. All there is the appeasing of bureaucrats and the focusing on short-term outcomes at the expense of the long run. There we are. There are rumors Xi Jinping had a stroke yesterday. Yeah, I mean, it's also almost impossible to make any sense of rumors like that, but it would be interesting because I do think the strategy of the Chinese government over the last few years, almost 10 years now, has been dominated by Xi. He is the guiding force behind what China has done, and it's all been bad, almost all been bad. And if he leaves the stage, will China embrace something better? Will China move in a better direction? There are definitely better people in China, better people in Chinese politics who would like to see things moved in a freer, better direction. Realize that that's the only way to grow the Chinese economy. But whether those people will be given the freedom to do that, I don't think under Xi that can happen. But if Xi goes away, there'll be a power struggle. He has not cultivated a number two that is obvious. So there will be a massive power struggle, and it's an opportunity for the better people within that regime to rise to the top. Now, who knows? If maybe the reality is if you've survived this regime, if you're still around in this regime, then there are no better people. Everybody is committed to Xi's policies. Everybody's committed to greater and greater statism and more authoritarianism. It's hard to tell what's going on within China and within the Chinese regime. As somebody who really loves China, in many respects, Chinese people, and I think the potential vibe, the energy, the hard work, the potential innovation that they have, the potential to innovate. I hope Xi gets a stroke and drops dead, and I hope that somebody significantly better rises up and ultimately not only leads to a liberalization of the Chinese economy, but leads to a liberalization of the Chinese political system. I mean, imagine if you actually freed up the kind of talent and skill and brain power that exists in China. Imagine how the world would be changed. Imagine how the world would be changed if, you had 1.4 billion, 1.3 billion more Chinese being really productive as they can be in a free market. All right. Let's see. Yeah, and Mikat says he prefers Trump because he thinks he'll be tougher on China than Biden. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, Trump was a pussycat with regard to China. Again, he gave a great speech like Netanyahu, but he was a pussycat. And indeed, he's already appeasing China with what he's saying about Taiwan. He loves Xi. He said some really, really nice and positive things about Xi. There's zero reason to believe that Trump is going to be tough on China. Indeed, Biden has been, from the beginning, much tougher on China than Trump has been. Much tougher. 5 seconds. All right, let's see. Lots of Super Chat questions. That's good. Let's jump into the Super Chat questions. We've got a lot of $20 plus. We've got a lot of $2, $5, $10 Super Chats. We're $29 away from the goal for the second hour, or only 19. We just got another $10. Yeah, I mean, I'll just comment on this on this question out of order, just because it's related to what we just said. Hunter says, I read Chip Wars recently, the book I recommended. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. Everybody read it. If you want to understand the world in which we live, Chip Wars is a crucial book to read. And Hunter continues, understanding the history of that industry, the chip industry, makes Trump's comments on Taiwan worse than laughable. Yes, worse than laughable. I mean, one of the facts about they stole the chip industry from us is the fact that the founder of TSMC, who's no longer CEO, I think he's chairman of the board, but he's very old now, tried to pitch the idea to Texas Instruments. They turned him down. He pitched the idea to several other chip makers in the United States and was turned down. He went to Taiwan and started it all from scratch. Morris Chang, thank you, Hex. Morris Chang, one of the giants of the modern tech business, one of the great engineers and businessmen of the last 40 years. So Morris Chang said, to hell, I can do this in Taiwan. Now, in Taiwan, he got the government to help. But it was a great idea. It's proved himself a phenomenally profitable idea, and U.S. companies had plenty of opportunities to do it with Morris Chang, and turned him down. Yeah, highly recommend Chip Wars. It was my favorite book of last year or the year before. I can't remember when I read it, but I highly recommend it on this show, and I did a whole show about it at some point. So yes, Hunter, I agree with you completely. I mean, Trump is not very smart. He's not very smart. He just doesn't have the brain power. He's just not smart. He's great at marketing. He's great at people reading. He's very good at marketing, very good at reading people. But when it comes to anything conceptual, anything that has moving pieces, anything that involves 3D chess, anything that involves abstract thinking or seeing into the future, he's just not smart. And then on top of that, he has not zero understanding of economics. He literally has negative understanding of economics. That is, his understanding of economics is primitive. It's pre-mercantilist. I mean, it's mercantilist at its level, but it's very, 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 very primitive. So none of this, when he says stuff like this, doesn't surprise me. Even his understanding of business, really his understanding of business, is very minimal outside maybe of the real estate business. He just doesn't understand tech, how tech works, how business works, the win-win nature of business. I think, yeah, and he's a dishonest businessman. He's a dishonest businessman. Somebody I know who interviewed for a job with Trump when Trump was elected in 2016. The first thing Trump told him was a story about how Trump, screwed another businessman and how proud he was of being able to screw this other businessman. Screwed him, lied to him, deceived him, behaved in a fraudulent manner towards him, and how, yes, wasn't this great? And the person I know, of course, is a man of integrity and said, I can never, ever, ever work for a man like this. Anyway, that's, you guys have all heard that from me about Trump. All right, let's start with David and Liam, each of whom did $100. So thank you guys. Really, really appreciate that. You guys got us to the second hour goal very quickly because these $200, yeah, they make it add up quickly. So we're now moving towards the third hour goal. All right, David says, is Vance looking to usurp the Republican Party ASAP? Or will he kowtow to Trump in the hope he gains power over the next 4 years? Oh, no, I think he's going to play this slow. He understands that Trump has the charisma, Trump has the party, that Trump has the loyalty of the party, that he is riding on Trump's coattails. He understands that. You see, J.D. Vance, this is the difference between J.D. Vance and Trump. J.D. Vance is smart. I mean, he really is smart. Again, Yale Law School, did his undergrad in 2 years. But beyond that, venture capitalist. Beyond that, he's smart. So he understands that the future is his and that he needs to be patient. He will definitely try to influence Trump to guide him in what he views as the right direction. But he will also want Trump to be successful because that way he can then run as Trump's replacement in 4 years, assuming Trump retires in 4 years. Follows the Constitution in that sense, or where he tells the court to figure out how to enforce it. So he will play it cool, influence Trump, hope that the Trump administration is successful, and wait for his turn. In the meantime, he will use the bully pulpit that he will now have. He will use his insider perspective inside Republican politics to start to build a power base within the Republican Party. So he will start putting his people in the right places. He and Josh Hawley, who is a brother in spirit to J.D. Vance, you will see their profile in the Republican Party rise and their influence on all the different levers of power within the party, particularly the levers of power that determine policy, that determine ideology, that shape the Republican Party moving into the future. This is Trump's party, 100%. And J.D. Vance is going to spend the next 4 years figuring out, really thinking through and figuring out, how do I take Trump's party and turn it into a new right call it even Christian Conservative Party, a Christian Nationalist Party. How do I take Trump's complete and utter pragmatism and use it for my ideological purposes? And it's going to be fascinating to watch. It's going to be horrible, but sometimes horror is fascinating, right? Sometimes horror is fascinating. You guys like horror movies, right? I hate them, but horror is fascinating. Watching the train wreck, sometimes you can't take your eyes off of it. Talk about trains and nationalization and wrecks. We've got a wreck in American politics, and we've got train nationalization in the UK. I mean, things are not going our way, guys. Not going our way. Thank you, David. Liam, I spoke to a few Israelis who actually believe Biden will be better for Israel than Trump. Trump is turning the right away from capitalism, away from Israel, away from optimism, and the little good that's still in this country. It's hard to agree we're not in 1920s Germany. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue. It's hard to draw. You're never going to have exact parallels, but we are in a very dark place in American politics. The left is completely bankrupt, and the only moral fervor is with the far left. They are not popular. The American people are not interested in the far left. You saw that with one of the squad losing his primary to another Democrat in New York. But there's no fire in center left politicians. So the left is hopeless, and now the right is turning hopeless to fascist. Trump is not ideological, but he will create such a mess that he will lay the foundation. I've always said this. I said this since 2016. Trump will lay the foundation that will make a principled, ideological, nationalist, fascist-like person possible. All right. Let's see. Enter the Game says, just wanted to say thank you, Yaron. I've been going through your old interviews and other objectivists, and it's been great. I'm glad you're enjoying them. Thank you, Enter the Game. Really appreciate the support. Value for value. I appreciate that. We're all traders, or should be. Adam, politicians claim a mandate based on their vote margin. Given Trump's friendship with Kim and Putin, and through them with Iran, should one vote from whoever stands against Trump just to cut down Trump's claimed mandate? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, I don't know that any one of your votes will matter, but I think Trump winning in a landslide will be an unbelievable disaster for this country. So it's a disaster if he wins at a small margin, but not quite as big of one. As I've said, the best thing is if he loses in a landslide, but that's not going to happen. So I don't know. I mean, every one of you has to make your own judgment about how to vote. I completely understand, and I don't think there is, just one way to vote. I'll give you an example. This Biden administration, because of its regulatory policies, is destroying certain businesses. Certain businesses cannot function. They cannot make a profit, under Biden's administration. So some people's livelihood is at stake. I can't tell them, forget about your livelihood, think about the long term. It's not clear there is a long term for them if their livelihood is destroyed. And of course, the long term is unknowable with certainty. So, they've got to survive. So We all have to make our own decisions about how we're going to vote. But Trump winning by a smaller margin is better than Trump winning by a bigger margin. So if you make a difference, make a difference. I'm all for voting against Trump generally. Liam, how do we communicate with people who don't have the missing link? Who don't have or do have the missing link? It's as if we have to supply everyone with a link to integrate data into their head hard drive before our ideas will penetrate. Yes, I mean this is why it's so slow. This is why it takes so much time. This is why we're not making as much progress as we'd like. It's because, yes, the majority of people out there are missing links and they're not conceptualizing. And our point of view requires the ability to conceptualize, requires the ability to abstract, requires the ability to think. And so what do we need? We need to get those who are intelligent. We need to get as many of the thinkers as possible. As Ayn Rand called it, my kind of reader. We need to get as many of her kind of readers as possible. And we need to train as many intellectuals as possible so that one day those unthinking missing links will still be followers maybe, but they'll be followers of better intellectuals, not because they know they're better intellectuals, but because that's what is common. There are just a lot of these better intellectuals around, and I'm going to follow them. And if those intellectuals are good speakers, they're good writers, they're engaging, they have some charisma, then people will follow them as we make objectivism more mainstream. I mean, we need to make objectivism more mainstream. The way to do that is to have hundreds of intellectuals writing, speaking, and writing and speaking, and writing and speaking some more, and writing some more, until people are just flooded with this stuff, and they go, oh, okay, well, it's kind of mainstream. It's kind of one of those things, one of those ideas. It's the only way to win. So the only way is to support the Ayn Rand Institute in the training, development of new intellectuals, and getting as many of them out there in as bigger way as possible. Michael, my question yesterday was not, do people think asserting themselves means you're a joke? The question was, do people think the way to assert yourself or set boundaries is by being a jerk or being nasty? I think some people, well, I don't think people think that. I don't think people think that. I think that they don't know how to assert themselves. So I think what happens is they don't know what it looks like. They don't have good models of people asserting themselves who are not jokes. So they think that asserting themselves is being Donald Trump, being a joke. They think that asserting themselves as being whatever. And they don't have enough models of people who assert themselves in a rational way, in a moral way, in a thoughtful way. So they adopt the joke behavior because there's not enough. There's nothing else. Now, some people are just jokes. It's not that they, and it's the only thing they know. Like Trump doesn't think of himself, I need to assert myself, therefore I need to be a joke. I think he's just a joke. And he has no self-esteem. So for him, the mechanism is a defense mechanism. It's to create a pseudo self-esteem, which is as much to fake it to himself as it is to fake it to you. Whereas I think that most people are not trying to create a pseudo self-esteem. They don't have the tools. They don't have the knowledge, and they're struggling with that. Clark, meant to ask Steve Simpson this: should you be allowed to sue a judge? Currently, judges have complete immunity. They cannot be sued in their official capacity. Would this tie up courts to allow this? Yeah, I mean, I really don't think you should be able to sue a judge. Again, what are you going to sue him of? He'd have to be grossly negligent. And I guess there are mechanisms by which boards of judges, if a judge is corrupt or negligent, can fire a judge. But I don't think lawsuits are supposed to, look, the whole area of negligence and liability and suing people has to be reconceived objectively. It has to be rethought. When can you sue? When can't you sue? Who can you sue? Who can't you sue? Has to be really thought about. Has to be really thought about. And I'm not a legal philosopher. It needs legal philosophers to think about this and to set boundaries and to figure out what is what, right? And how to do this properly. What we have today is ridiculous. And then, you know, in order to prevent some of these lawsuits, we have things like, we have the deep pocket doctrine, just go after deep pocket. But we have, I don't know, what is it, where no fault insurance. So we don't even bother figuring out whose fault it is. We don't care. Each insurance company just pays your expenses, no matter what, which is just absurd. So these are ways in which we try to cope with an absurd system. But the system is absurd. And I don't know anybody in objectivism who's done the research and is willing to talk about this, but it is an area, if somebody's out there interested in legal theory and legal philosophy, is to focus on this area of liability, to focus on this area of lawsuits and when it, you know, liability, I think is the term for that part of. Rand says, what? Scott is blocked? That's worth some money. Well, I mean, I'll block more people if you pay me to do it. I'm kidding. Yes, I've decided my tolerance for meanness combined with stupidity, combined with complete and utter disrespect and dishonesty is going to be zero. So, you know, Scott did this whole show on, I guess, his podcast, denouncing me and lying about me. Why should I give him a platform here? The same with Swig, just particularly Scott's comments here were so lacked any value. I don't mind disagreement. I actually like disagreement. This is why I kept him on for so long. I like people who disagree with me. That's good. It's fine. People who say I'm wrong or think differently about something, that's all good. But not if it's sneering and not if it's disrespectful and not if it's devoid of any real value. Disagreement can be valuable. And not if they're lying. Not if they're being dishonest. And Scott's dishonest and Swig, who I just blocked, he's done some horrible things. So, he doesn't deserve to be here. Sylvanos, if the UK government is embracing nationalization on this level, how long till we get the British equivalents of funny mustache man? I don't think we will. I mean, we didn't get it last time the Labour Party nationalized a bunch of stuff. We didn't in England go from socialism to fascism. We actually went from socialism to Margaret Thatcher. I don't know what's going to happen in Britain. The reality is the Labour did not get, while they won a lot of seats, huge majority in Parliament, they did not get a lot of votes. Percentage of the British population that voted for them is quite small. So they're not gonna, if they keep on this route and the economy tanks, they're not gonna stay. They're not gonna survive. They're not gonna survive. And there will be a backlash, and I don't know where the backlash will take us. Maybe it'll take us to something more fascist. Maybe it'll take it to maybe Kemi. I'm a big Kemi fan. I know I'm probably too much of a fan, but maybe Kemi takes over the Conservative Party and turns it into more of a free market party. Maybe it's this Reform Party. I don't know. But I don't think Labour has staying power. It'll be around for the next 5 years, but I don't know that it has staying power beyond that, because things are not going to go well, and they won't have solutions, and the British public does not support them. A majority of the Brits are way to the right in all the bad and good things of the Labour Party. Sylvanos, does the presence of the US prevent the potential of the UK to go like Germany in the 19th century? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think what prevents it is a real strong classical liberal tendency within Britain. I think there still is a real strong tendency towards classical liberalism in that country. A few years ago, I was very excited about the UK because it's secular, and there seem to be some real pro-capitalism, pro-market people, and there seems to be a real push towards greater freedom, and there were some good people. So it really did seem, just not that long ago, that Britain was going in the right direction. And then, what's his name? Johnson was a complete fiasco, and Liz Truss, God, I don't know what happened to her, but she couldn't defend even the simplest of her plans, and she completely imploded. And we got Sunak, who is a nothing, who is a zero. And this is the response, the Conservatives, not to any particular policy being wrong or bad, but to the Conservative Party being pathetic. Absolutely, unmitigatedly pathetic, standing for absolutely nothing, and as a consequence, achieving nothing, not differentiating themselves in any way from the left, just being a nothing party. I think Truss had a real opportunity to shake things up, but she needed to be a lot braver, a lot more courageous, and she needed to be a much better communicator. She needed to rally the British people around her vision. She seemed to have a vision, and she couldn't do it. And the vision wasn't that great. It could have been much better. But she had it. She had something, and she couldn't communicate it. I mean, a lot of her defeat was a lack of ability to communicate. Adam, say what you will about England's rail line, but that Rio Norte line is immaculate. Amazing how life imitates art. Yes, the Rio Norte line from Atlas Shrugged. I mean, the worst railroad system in the world for passengers is in the U.S., I think. Not in the world, right? The worst. But the U.S. has an awful railway system. The Italians are better, surprisingly. And they didn't need Mussolini to get the trains to run on time. They run on time by being privatized. So the UK has the Italians have a pretty good rail system. Even the UK system is better than the American system. I mean, our train system is just awful. The trains are not nice. They don't necessarily run on time. They're not comfortable. They're not fast. Yeah, it's pathetic. They're not that safe. All right. We now have a bunch of $2, $5, and $10 questions we're going to. Andrew, the Teamsters leaders was enthusiastic about Vance, of course, but his real praise was for Hawley, of course, who apparently joins workers' picket lines, is against right to work, and lambasts corporations and their execs. Yes. How long have I been telling you this? Since Josh Hawley entered the political world. at least 4 years, maybe 6, I can't remember. Yes, yes, yes. Josh Hawley is the enemy, and J.D. Vance is his partner in crime. And Trump just made him VP. And that makes Trump all the more unelectable. He was already unelectable. All the more unelectable. Problem is, Biden's unelectable too. I don't know. Luckily, I don't have to vote for president. Representative Crenshaw's analysis points out the building was outside of the Secret Service area of responsibility. It was the local police responsibility who failed to call and warn the Secret Service. I mean, that is possible. It seems a little strange. It's elevated ground, direct line of sight to where the president's going to talk. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Now, Representative Crenshaw is a smart guy who had a, I can't remember what service he served in, but had a, from what I can tell, distinguished military career, so he knows something about these things. But it doesn't really make sense to me because of that line of sight issue. And whoever failed, failed big time. Big time. So maybe it was the local police. Isn't it ironic, Hyper Reason says, that when Trump looked at the immigration chart, it saved his life? Christians credit God, but in reality, it was the chart that did it. No, you have to look deeper. In reality, it was immigration that did it. If not for mass illegal immigration, that chart wouldn't have been there. If not for mass illegal immigration, Trump wouldn't have wanted to talk about it. In other words, if not for mass illegal immigration under Biden, Trump would be dead right now. Immigration, illegal immigration, on a large scale, actually is what saved Trump's life. Mary Eileen recommends I use cluster phenomenon. Phenomenon, is it phenomenon? There's a, I mean, what she purposefully put in a word, I'm sure, that I cannot pronounce. That she knows that I mispronounce regularly. Thank you, Mary Eileen. Hopper Campbell, did you see Piers Morgan and Dave Rubin dismantle Destiny over his monstrous comments about what happened to Trump? No, I didn't. I don't really. I mean, what's to dismantle? The guy, it's a stupid comment. I mean, actually, if you want to hear a really good commentary on the Trump assassination attempt and why I don't need Dave Rubin and Piers Morgan to show me this is stupid. I mean, you don't need them to do it. But you want to hear a good commentary on it, I recommend listening to Sam Harris. Sam Harris has a 13-minute segment, I think it came out yesterday or the day before, about the assassination. Excellent. I pretty much agree with everything he says there. He despises Trump, he hates Trump, all of that, but he thinks the assassination was assassinating Trump, actually killing him, would have been an unmitigated disaster. And I think he's absolutely right. Using political violence that way to get rid of a candidate is wrong. And so Sam Harris, who hates Trump, did an excellent one on why he didn't address Destiny, but he addressed people who think like Destiny. Wes, $50, thank you. Really, really appreciate it. Jeremy, thank you for the sticker. Ian Mirka, thank you. Can't scroll further back. That's all I have. Maybe I can scroll here. Oh, I can do it here. I didn't know this. This is cool. All right, so I can go all the way back because I don't think I've thanked any of the sticker people. Martin Anderson, thank you. Everybody else was a question. Oh, no. Silvanos, right at the beginning. Thank you, Silvanos. And Eric. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, guys, everybody, for the stickers. Really helps. It really gets us closer to the goal. Again, shows that value for value. Amiket also became a member, so thank you for becoming a member. All right, not your average algorithm. Is an elevator to space possible, and would you consider taking it to spend a few nights on a space station or an elevator to Mars? I don't know if it's possible. I have no idea. I don't think it is, but I have no idea. I don't know enough physics. I have no idea. I don't know. Would I take it? Probably not. I have fear of heights. It would freak me out too much. I think I would be okay once I got to space. But the way up would be hard for me. I don't like looking out the airplane window when I'm flying, particularly as we're going up or as we're coming down. I do, but I don't like it. I overcome my fear. I fly a lot. Not your average algorithm corrects, not Mars, the moon. Yeah, I mean, I don't think such a thing is possible, but I really don't know. All right, we have plenty of time today, so feel free to ask questions. I'll go for as long as there are questions. We've got 3, 6, 7 questions left, so a finite amount of time before we're done. Not your average algorithm. To what extent is Donald Trump's success a failure of Ayn Rand's ability to change the culture? I don't want to. I think failure is the wrong word. You know, it's not like anybody thought post Atlas Shrugged. Anybody thought you could change the culture by now. You could say Donald Trump's success is a consequence of the fact that Ayn Rand's influence is not as great in the culture. I think that's true. Now, whether that is a consequence of somebody's failure or whether that is a consequence of it was never possible, I don't know. I just don't know. To change the intellectual direction of a world, because it's not even a country, it's a world, is very, very difficult. It takes a very long time. So very difficult to assess what exactly the cause. But yeah, if Ayn Rand had more influence in the culture, Donald Trump would not have been elected in 2016. I think that is true. Alejandro, J.D. Vance has a Sulla vibe, and just like with Sulla, he will destroy the remnants of our republic. Yeah, if he gets to power, I think he will. I agree with you. It's very, very, very dangerous. And now he's very close to power. Very, very close to power. Mary Eileen, Trump will think he's anointed, has a mandate, and can get away with just about anything. He is a petty, childish, will seek revenge and demean the office. Yeah, and he also, I wouldn't be surprised if in his speech tomorrow, I guess, he claims that God saved him. We'll see. But he might even start believing himself that he is the anointed one, that he's been anointed by a superpower. Because, yeah, I mean, that was a close call. Really close call. Capitalist spy. Is Elon Musk a modern John Galt? No. I wish he was, but no. No, unfortunately. Elon Musk is infuriating because he's sometimes excellent. He's sometimes really, really good, and sometimes he's just awful. He just endorsed Donald Trump full-heartedly, putting $45 million a month to support him. Elon Musk is a mixed bag. When he's good, he's really good. And when he's bad, he's pretty bad. And he's not consistent enough to be John Galt. He's not philosophical at all. That's the one thing about Elon Musk, is he's not philosophical. He's gone from being center-left, which he used to be, to MAGA conservative, anti-Ukraine, pro-Putin, just all over the place. but in a MAGA kind of way. But then once in a while you get a flash. He's got courage. He's got charisma and he's got courage. I give him that. But he's not John Galt. Far, far, far from it. End to the game. Topic idea. Happiness in times of chaos and hardship. Yep. When you think about what I would say, I mean, I'd repeat a lot of what I've said in the past, but that's okay. I don't think you guys mind if I repeat myself on a positive topic. Yeah, I think that's good. Yep. All right. Thank you. Enter the game. Good topic. I like it. Fend up. Idea for secularizing karma. Karma could denote that morality is practical, immorality impractical. That's how people tend to use it these days. I don't know anyone who uses it to mean reincarnation based on actions. But the reality is that nobody out there thinks that morality is practical. So I get it. I get it. I agree with you that that is a good way to use karma. I agree with you that it's true. But is it the fact that that's how people use it? I still think people use it as in the sense of there's a force out there. There's a force out there. And it might be related to morality, but there's a force out there. I don't think anybody holds this concept of morality as practical and immorality impractical. Finn Harposa says, karma idea inspired by Taylor Swift's song called Karma. I wonder how, I don't know how Taylor Swift uses it either. I don't know. Paul says, I think the Institute in Austin should have a life-size statue of Rand, maybe in the foyer for archives. Cult of individualists is an oxymoron. There's a question mark. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, at the Institute, we do have a portrait of Ayn Rand, a bust of Ayn Rand. I don't know if we'll ever have a full sculpture of Ayn Rand. I would like to see a sculpture of Atlas Shrugged, of Atlas, something like that, in the foyer. I think something that symbolizes her work, symbolizes her ideas. I know there'll be pushback on that from some people on the board because how tricky it is to identify and choose great sculpture that lives up to Ayn Rand, lives up to who she was and what she is in a building named after her is tricky. So it's I don't know what we're going to do. We'll see. I mean, that's part of. I mean, the building will not be open until, I think, early to mid 2028. So we've got 3.5, 4 years to really think about it and figure it out and do it right. We're about to hire, professionals to start the work of planning out how to build this thing. It's very exciting. Very, very exciting. And it is happening. Hunter, Nikki Haley is no longer defensible. Anything good is undermined. Anything good is undermined. She's proven herself a blank. Good show you're on. Yeah, sadly, it really is sad to see these politicians lose it and grovel. Andrew, regarding monopolies, is the proper capitalist position that they would not exist in a free market, or that they could exist in if a single company was objectively superior? Well, it depends what you mean by monopoly. If you mean by monopoly market dominance, a large company that just dominates its market, then sure, that will exist. If you mean by a monopoly somebody who is in a position where nobody can compete with them, where competition cannot arise even if they become weak, even if they're not that good, then, which is what I think what people conventionally think about monopolies, then no, then monopoly cannot exist. Monopoly historically has meant a grant of exclusivity. A grant by who? By government. So, that kind of monopoly cannot exist. And so you cannot have a monopoly of the political kind. The only kind of monopoly, if you want to call it that, I wouldn't even call it that, is a company that's dominant. That can definitely happen. All right, guys. Thank you. Really, really appreciate the support. Great super chat today. Good questions. Hope you enjoyed the show. I will be back tomorrow. I think it'll be 2 o'clock. I know today was a little late. I'll see. There's other stuff I have to do tomorrow, so we'll see what time exactly. But either 2 or 3 o'clock tomorrow, we'll definitely have a show. And then Friday, we'll do a show about happiness in chaotic times. Chaotic times. So look forward to a positive show on Friday. Have a great rest of your week. And again, thank you guys. Thanks for all the support. Really, really appreciate it.